The desert wind carried more than sand that March morning in 1883. It carried the smell of death. When Sheriff Thomas McKenzie arrived at the Brennan Settlers Camp, 15 miles south of Florence, Arizona, he found a scene that would haunt his dreams until his last day. 7 bodies scattered among charred wagons, cattle dispersed across the desert, and a silence so absolute it seemed to scream. There were no clear tracks, no witnesses, no sense to it. Only dried blood mixed with the red Arizona dust. What began as a routine investigation would become the territory's greatest criminal mystery, an enigma that would divide the town between conspiracy theories, baseless accusations, and secrets buried as deeply as the victim's body. 20 years later, when Thomas McKenzie lay on his deathbed, his final words were, "I know who did Florence, ... but they can never prove it." And he took the secret to his grave. Dawn painted the sky orange when Jacob Miller, a domesticated Apache hunter who worked as a tracker for Fort Lowell, galloped desperately down Florence's main street. His horse foamed at the mouth, and Jacob himself looked like he'd seen the devil in person. He dismounted in front of the sheriff's office so hastily he nearly fell, and began shouting in a mix of English and Apache that made several windows open along the street. Thomas McKenzie emerged from the office, still buttoning his vest, his hat crooked on his head. He was 42 years old with an impeccable reputation, built over 15 years as a lawman, and a scar that cut across his face from his left eye to his China gift from a bank robber in Tombstone years ago. His gray eyes studied Jacob with the calm of someone who had seen plenty of bad things in life. "Calm down, Jacob. Breathe and tell me properly." "Dead, Sheriff. All dead. The Brennan family. The wagons, ... Blood everywhere." Jacob trembled, his hands gesturing frantically. "I was tracking that cougar that's been attacking Mr. Patterson's cattle, followed the tracks to the southern valley near the canyon. That's when I saw the wagons. The smell. Good God, the smell, ... Double quotes. McKenzie didn't wait for more explanations. He gathered his deputy, a young man named William Billy Coltrane, and the two followed Jacob into the desert. The ride took just over an hour, but it felt like an eternity. The sun was already high when they arrived, and the heat was becoming unbearable. The Brennan camp was located in a natural depression between red rocks, a place that offered protection from the wind and shade during the hottest hours. 3 wagons formed a semicircle, but 2 of them were completely charred. The third remained intact, as if the attackers had been interrupted or simply lost interest. McKenzie dismounted slowly, his hand instinctively going to the revolver in his holster. Billy turned pale upon seeing the first body. Patrick Brennan, the family patriarch, lay face down about 20 feet from the main wagon. Even from a distance, the bullet hole in his back was visible. 6 other bodies were scattered around the camp. Mary Brennan, his wife, their 3 children, 2 boys aged 8 and 10, and a girl only 5 years old, Patrick's brother, Sean, and a cowboy named Dutch Anderson, who was traveling with them. Holy ... Billy turned and vomited behind a rock. McKenzie had seen death before, but this was different. It wasn't just the number of victims, but the brutality. The bodies showed multiple wounds, gunshots, stab wounds, signs of beating. It was as if the killers had been consumed by inexplicable fury. But what disturbed the sheriff most was the absence of logic in the massacre. Jacob examined the perimeter. Look for tracks, anything that indicates how many there were and where they went. While the Apache tracker worked, Mackenzie investigated the wagons. The one that remained intact contained personal belongings, some provisions, farming tools, nothing of exceptional value. The Brennans were Irish settlers who had arrived in Florence only 3 months earlier, coming from Boston. They bought land north of town. Good land for planting. According to the local real estate agent, Salaman Greenberg, they planned to start a cotton farm. Sheriff, Jacob waved from a rocky elevation. I found something. Mackenzie climbed to where the tracker was. Jacob pointed to marks on the ground horse tracks, many of them, perhaps a dozen. But something was wrong. The tracks came from different directions, overlapped, formed confusing patterns. It doesn't make sense, Jacob muttered. It's as if they tried to confuse the tracks on purpose. Look, here these tracks go north, but these others go east. And there's more. Some horses were shod, others weren't. Some were large horses, others smaller, probably ponies. Apache asked Mackenzie, though he already knew the answer. Jacob shook his head. Apache don't shoot horses, and they don't kill like this. When Apache attack, it's quick, precise. They take what they need and leave. This here, ... He gestured to the camp. This is hatred, Sheriff. Hatred or madness. When they returned to the camp, Billy had composed himself and was examining the bodies. Sheriff, look at this. He pointed to Patrick Brennan. This man was shot first in the back, but then someone turned him over and put 2 more shots in his chest. Why? He was already dead. It was a good question. Mackenzie knelt beside the body, studying the wounds. Billy was right. This wasn't just murder. It was an execution. He looked at the other bodies and saw the same pattern. Excessive, unnecessary violence. And there's more, Billy continued. They took almost nothing. There's still food in the wagons, tools, even a small box with about $50 in coins I found under a blanket. What kind of bandit leaves money behind? Florence was a small town with about 300 permanent residents, plus some prospectors who came and went. News traveled fast, and when Mackenzie returned with the Brennan bodies in borrowed wagons, half the town was already on Main Street waiting. Father O'Brien, a white-haired Irishman who had come to Arizona to evangelize the natives, with little success, blessed the bodies and organized a collective wake. Florence's small Catholic church had never seen so many people. Everyone was horrified, but also curious and frightened. If an entire family could be massacred 15 miles from town, who could guarantee it wouldn't happen again? Mackenzie established a temporary office in Marcus Flynn's saloon, a grumpy German who had fought in the Civil War for the Union's side. There, he began interviewing everyone who had contact with the Brennans in recent weeks. Salaman Greenberg, the real estate agent, was first. He was a short, fat man with an extravagant mustache, waxed at the tips. He sweated profusely as he spoke. They were good people, Sheriff. Honest. They paid cash for the land. Everything proper. Patrick told me he'd saved for 10 years in Boston to make this move. He wanted to give his children a better life. Did anyone know he had money? Greenberg hesitated. Well, ... He paid in front of some people at the bank. Mr. Wilson was there, and that cowboy, Jack Fast Hands, and, oh yes, Dawson was there too. Mackenzie noted the names. Charles Wilson was the local bank owner, a respected man. Jack Fast Hands McGregor was a cowboy with a dubious reputation, known for being quick on the draw and even quicker at losing money at poker, and Frank Dawson. Dawson was complicated. Frank Dawson had arrived in Florence 6 months earlier, claiming to be a land speculator from Texas. He bought the old Miller Ranch, no relation to Jacob, and said he was forming a large cattle operation. But there were always rumors in the West, that Dawson had a shady past in Texas, something involving stolen land and a dead judge. Mackenzie found Dawson at the saloon that night. He was a tall man with broad shoulders, with cold blue eyes that seemed to calculate the value of everything and everyone. He wore expensive clothes, a gold chain on his vest, and had the soft hands of someone who didn't work the land he claimed to own. "Terrible tragedy," Dawson said, drinking whiskey. "But I don't see how I can help, Sheriff. I barely knew the Brennans. You were at the bank when Patrick paid for the land." "I was." "So what? Half the town was there. It was payday for the Peterson Ranch cowboys. The land the Brennans bought is near yours." Dawson smiled, but it wasn't a friendly smile. "Sheriff, if you're insinuating something, be direct." "Yes, I was interested in that land. I made an offer to Greenberg before the Brennans arrived, but they offered more, and I accepted it. I'm a businessman, not a murderer. Where were you the night of the attack?" "At my ranch, with my men. We have 12 cowboys who can confirm that." Testimonies from men paid by Dawson weren't worth much, but Mackenzie had no evidence to arrest him. Not yet. Over the following days, the sheriff interviewed dozens of people. Jack Fast Hands had a weak alibi. He claimed to be playing poker at the saloon, but no one could remember exactly when he arrived or left. Charles Wilson, the banker, was offended by the mere suggestion of involvement. A merchant named Harvey Webb mentioned seeing a group of strange riders passing through town 3 days before the massacre, but his description was too vague to be useful. The major breakthrough came when Billy Coltrane brought disturbing information. "Sheriff, I talked to Miss Sarah from the brothel. She said Dutch Anderson, that cowboy who died with the Brennans, was there the night before the attack. He was drunk and talking too much. Talking about..." "What about a man?" Dutch said. "Patrick Brennan had a map of something valuable, something he found on the land he bought. Dutch didn't know what exactly, but he swore he'd get rich." A map? That changed everything. Mackenzie returned to the massacre site with Jacob and Billy, looking for something they'd missed the first time. He turned over every inch of the remaining wagons, examined the Brennans' personal belongings that had been stored in the sheriff's office. Nothing. If there was a map, the killers took it, or Dutch was too drunk and made it all up, Billy suggested. But Mackenzie didn't believe that. Something had motivated that massacre, and it wasn't common robbery. It was something specific, something the Brennans had or knew. Jacob Miller brought another piece of the puzzle. "Sheriff, I spoke with my cousin who lives on the reservation. He said some young Apaches have been telling stories about evil spirits in that region near where the Brennans were killed. They say it's cursed land. That bad things have happened there since before the white man came." "Apache superstition," Billy grumbled. But Mackenzie didn't dismiss anything. He had learned over the years that superstitions usually had some foundation in reality. What kind of bad things? Disappearances. People who entered that valley and were never seen again. "My cousin says the tribe's elders avoided that area even before the Spanish arrived. There are ancient stories about a mine or a cave where something terrible happened long ago. A mine, a map, land with buried secrets." The town began to divide. In Florence, as in any small western town, rumors were common currency, and everyone had a theory about who had massacred the Brennan. The Irish, led by Father O'Brien, openly accused Frank Dawson. That greedy Texan wanted the land and killed an entire family for it, shouted Sean Murphy, a miner who had been Patrick Brennan's friend, during a tense meeting at the church. Dawson's men, in turn, spread rumors that it had been an Apache attack, despite Jacob Miller insisting no Apache was involved. "Everyone knows those savages are no good," said Hank Corbin, Dawson's foreman, Achi Dissolute. "Doesn't matter what that tame Apache says." Blood calls to blood. Racial tension increased dangerously. Some settlers began talking about forming militias to protect themselves from the natives. Jacob Miller was threatened more than once, and Mackenzie had to intervene personally to prevent an ugly fight. But there were also those who believed in something more sinister. Old prospector Jeremiah Stone, who had prospected throughout Arizona Territory for the past 3 decades, appeared at Mackenzie's office with a disturbing story. "Sheriff, I know what's on those lands," Jeremiah said, his eyes red from drinking, shining with a mixture of fear and excitement. 40 years ago, when I arrived here, I met an old Apache, a medicine man. He showed me drawings in a cave, ancient drawings made by people who lived here before even the Apaches. And he told me about a mine, not gold or silver, but something the ancients considered sacred, something men would kill for. "What kind of thing?" Jeremiah lowered his voice, as if afraid someone might hear. "Turquoise, Sheriff, but not just any turquoise. The cave supposedly contains the largest vein of high-quality turquoise ever discovered. To the ancients, turquoise was more valuable than gold, and to the Spanish, who came later, well, they'd kill for it too. There are stories of entire expeditions that disappeared looking for this mine. And you think Patrick Brennan discovered this mine? I think he discovered something, and someone decided he shouldn't live to tell about it." Jeremiah's story seemed too fantastic, but Mackenzie couldn't ignore it. He began researching old town records, Spanish documents archived at the mayor's house. There, he found vague references to a blue mine that 17th century Spanish missionaries had searched for unsuccessfully. Meanwhile, Billy Coltrane made a disturbing discovery. Investigating Frank Dawson's past, he sent telegrams to Texas and received alarming responses. Dawson had been investigated in Austin for allegedly forging land deeds. Witnesses had disappeared before trial, and the case was dismissed for lack of evidence. Even more worrying, a judge who had ordered the investigation was found dead in mysterious circumstances. Officially, it was a riding accident, but there were rumors of murder. "I need to arrest Dawson," Mackenzie told Billy. "But I don't have enough evidence, just circumstances and rumors. What if we provoke him? Make him make a mistake?" It was risky, but Mackenzie saw no alternative. He carefully spread a rumor that he had found documents among Patrick Brennan's belongings, documents that proved the location of the turquoise mine and incriminated someone important in town. The trap was set. 2 days later, the sheriff's office was broken into during the night. Whoever entered knew what they were doing. The lock was professionally picked, and the files were meticulously searched. But they found nothing, because there was nothing to find. Mackenzie and Billy were waiting across the street, hidden in Elias Cooper's hardware store. They watched as 3 men left the office and mounted their horses. The moonlight was dim, but sufficient to recognize 2 of them: Hank Corbin, Dawson's foreman, and Jack Fast Hands McGregor. "Let's follow them," Mackenzie whispered. The nighttime pursuit led them directly to Frank Dawson's ranch. The 3 men entered the main house, and Mackenzie could hear raised voices inside. He couldn't distinguish the words, but the tone was argumentative, perhaps even a fight. Then a shot. Mackenzie and Billy ran to the house, guns drawn. They broke down the door and found a chaotic scene. Hank Corbin was on the floor, holding his stomach as blood flowed between his fingers. Jack Fast's hands was backed against the wall, hands raised, and Frank Dawson held a smoking revolver, his expression a mixture of rage and panic. "Drop the gun, Dawson," Mackenzie ordered. To the sheriff's surprise, Dawson obeyed immediately. It was self-defense. "This idiot was going to kill me." Hank Corbin tried to speak, but only blood came from his mouth. Jacob Miller, who had been following Mackenzie and Billy from a distance, ran into the house, but it was too late. The foreman died, right there, on Dawson's living room floor. "He confessed," gasped Jack Fast's hands, still terrified. Hank confessed that he and other men killed the Brennans on orders. On orders, ... He looked at Dawson, then at Mackenzie. "On whose orders?" The sheriff pressed. "Mine. It was on my orders." The voice came from the entrance. Everyone turned to see Solomon Greenberg standing in the doorway, a rifle pointed at the group. The fat, sweaty real estate agent didn't look so harmless now, but you'll never prove it. The next hour was a confusion of revelations and violence. Solomon Greenberg, realizing he was surrounded, tried to negotiate. "Mackenzie, be reasonable. There's enough money for all of us. The turquoise mine is worth millions, but the sheriff wasn't interested in negotiation." "Drop the rifle, Solomon. It's over." It was Jack Fasthands who, paradoxically, saved the situation. Still terrified and seeing a chance to reduce his own guilt, he drew his weapon and shot at Greenberg's rifle, hitting the barrel and making the gun fly from the real estate agent's hands. Billy immediately jumped on Greenberg, handcuffing him. Back at the sheriff's office, with Greenberg imprisoned and Jack Fasthands making a full confession in exchange for clemency, the whole story finally revealed itself. 6 months earlier, Solomon Greenberg had discovered references to the turquoise mine in old documents he was organizing for land sales. He researched obsessively and concluded the mine was somewhere on the land that belonged to the Brennans. When Patrick bought those lands, Greenberg panicked. "I tried to convince him to sell," Greenberg confessed, sweating even more profusely in the cell. "I offered double what he'd paid, but that stubborn Irishman refused. Said he was going to build a legacy for his children." Frank Dawson had been Greenberg's partner from the beginning. The Texan provided the men unscrupulous cowboys who would do anything for money. Hank Corbin led the attack, accompanied by 6 more men. Jack Fasthands was among them. "It was supposed to be quick," Jack said, his hands trembling as he smoked the cigarette Billy had given him. "Raid the camp, kill Patrick, force the family to reveal if they'd found anything on the land, then eliminate the witnesses." "But Patrick didn't know anything, did he?" asked Mackenzie, his voice heavy with disgust. Jack shook his head. "No. He kept screaming that he didn't know what we were talking about, that he just wanted to plant cotton. But Hank ... Hank went crazy, started beating him, and things got out of control. When we realized it, everyone was dead, even the children ... He stopped speaking, visibly shaken, and Dutch Anderson. He discovered the mine by accident, heard Greenberg talking with Dawson at the bank, tried to blackmail Solomon. That's why he was with the Brennans, was trying to find the mine on his own before handing over the information to us. Idiot. The trial was quick by Western standards. Solomon Greenberg and Frank Dawson were sentenced to hang for murder and conspiracy. Jack Fasthands had his sentence reduced to 20 years in prison for confessing and cooperating. 2 other cowboys who participated in the massacre were captured in the following weeks. One was hanged. The other received life imprisonment. 3 managed to flee to Mexico and were never found. But the story didn't end there. Thomas Mackenzie, obsessed with the complete truth, spent the following months searching for the famous turquoise mine. With Jacob Miller's help and using the references he'd found in the old documents, he explored every inch of the former Brennan lands. And he found it. The mine entrance was hidden behind a seasonal waterfall in a deep canyon, exactly as the Spanish documents described. The cave extended into the earth's depths, its walls glittering with veins of the highest quality turquoise, vibrant blue-green, worth a fortune. But there was more. At the back of the cave, Mackenzie and Jacob found skeletons, dozens of them. Some were ancient, clearly natives who had died centuries ago. Others were more recent, still wearing remnants of 17th century Spanish clothing, and there were signs of violence. Cracked skulls, bones with marks from swords and knives. "The elders were right," Jacob murmured, making a protective sign. "This land is cursed. Greed always brings death." Mackenzie stood at the cave entrance for a long time, looking at that wealth that had cost so many lives over the centuries. He thought of Patrick Brennan and his family, their simple dreams of a better life, shattered by the greed of men they didn't even know. He made a decision. Using dynamite he requisitioned from Fort Lowell under official pretense, Mackenzie and Jacob sealed the cave entrance. They caused such a complete collapse that it would be impossible to find the mine again without years of excavation. Then they destroyed all maps and documents that referenced the location. "Why?" Jacob asked. "You could have become rich. Share it. You could have given that money to the church to help other families." "Because it doesn't matter who finds this mine," Mackenzie replied. "Greed will always win. Better that it stays buried, along with all the secrets and all the deaths it caused." In the years that followed, rumors about the mine persisted. Treasure hunters occasionally appeared in Florence, looking for the legendary Blumen, but no one ever found it. Solomon Greenberg and Frank Dawson were hanged on a gray November morning in 1883, before a crowd of hundreds who came from throughout the region. Until the end, Greenberg tried to negotiate, offering to reveal the mine's exact location in exchange for clemency. But Mackenzie, who was present at the execution, remained silent. He knew the mine could no longer be found. Thomas Mackenzie continued as Florence's sheriff for another 17 years. He never married, never spoke about that day in the cave. Billy Coltrane, who became his permanent deputy, asked only once about what really happened to the mine. "It's where it should be," was all Mackenzie said. "Buried and forgotten." But in his final days, when he was dying of pneumonia in the winter of 1903, with Jacob Miller at his side, one of the few true friends he had, Mackenzie finally spoke. "I know who did Florence," he whispered, his voice weak. "But it wasn't just Greenberg and Dawson. It was greed. It was what this land does to people. And the secret is safe. Now, let it remain so." Jacob held his friend's hand as he closed his eyes for the last time. Years later, a young journalist from Phoenix visited Florence to write about the famous massacre of 1883. He interviewed the few who still remembered the events, including Jacob Miller, already a very old man. "And the mine?" the journalist asked. "Does it really exist?" Jacob looked at the distant mountains, at the red desert that held so many secrets. "Some mysteries," he said, "are better left unsolved. Some treasures are safer never being found. The Brennan land now belongs to a quiet farmer who plants corn and never asks about the past, and so it should remain." The Florence Massacre entered history as one of the most famous unsolved crimes of the old American West. History books mention Solomon Greenberg and Frank Dawson as responsible, but always with a caveat. though the exact motives remain obscure, because the true motivator mine worth millions that had caused death for centuries remained buried, literally and figuratively, under tons of rock in the Arizona desert. And there it remains to this day, if it still exists at all. Some secrets, after all, are meant to stay buried.